Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek singularity community from the Robservatory refit, which is getting there. It's getting there. I haven't had a lot of time. As you know, the reason I have not been on the Johnny Campia show this week is, yes, after 2 years, I was struck down with COVID. Today is the first day I'm feeling pretty back to my old self. Now, I was, of course, vaxxed and boosted. And what happened was Zoe, Elizabeth's oldest daughter, came back from a wedding in North Carolina and came down with COVID. And she came here to the house to quarantine rather than stay at her boyfriend's place because she didn't want to get his parents sick. And we had a bigger place. But unfortunately, because when she was here, Sophie, Zoe's sister, Elizabeth, and myself all got COVID. And it was interesting because Elizabeth wasn't feeling good last weekend when we were out for my birthday. And she took a test Monday morning. And I was literally about to walk into the new studio, to the new John Campia studio, and she called and sent me a picture and said, I'm positive I have COVID. And so I called John and did not go into the studio, and I went home. I took a test, and it was indeed positive. And so I've just been, it was weird. I mean, I felt it all. It was a fairly mild case, to be honest, but it still was. It wasn't good, you know. It was like a really, really bad cold where I was very, very achy. And Wednesday was the worst of it, so it hit me really Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday were bad, and then Thursday was better. And now I feel close to my old self, sort of. But anyway, I am back, and I figured I was going to do something different and special for the 800th episode of Robservations, but I've been doing these so sporadically. I want to get back on a regular schedule. Plus, I had something I wanted to talk about, so I figured, why not do a Robservations? You know, we'll do Midnight Musings. We'll have Let's Get Physical Media, and I'll get back on the whole the YouTube broadcasting. What do you call it? I don't even know what I'm going to say. I've got brain fog. I've got COVID brain fog. I'm just going to be back more. And also, Elizabeth and I, wait for it, are bringing back whining about movies. A lot of people, we haven't done it in like a year, but we did over 100 episodes where Elizabeth and I will share a bottle of wine while we discuss a film. I'm not sure what that film is going to be yet, but we are going to do it. So we're back. We're all back. Everybody's back. And by the way, I went to this place here locally, Baker's Twin Kitchen, established in 1952. Pretty good. Got lunch there. It's pretty good. I got a teriyaki chicken sandwich. I got to say, I quite enjoyed it. So what is it that made me want to come back and jump on the show, even though I probably should stay in bed? Would you believe Star Trek? Ghosts of Illyria. This week's episode of Strange New Worlds. I haven't really given you a review of Strange New Worlds yet. That's coming. But There was something about this particular episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds that really, really bothered me. Mainly because it once again speaks to the creative bankruptcy of the creative team. Now, I want to read an interview that was given by the co-showrunner of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Henry Alonzo Myers. Now, what has Henry Alonzo Myers written before he wrote for Star Trek Strange New Worlds? He was written for CSI and Ugly Betty and GCB and The Carrie Diaries, the prequel to Sex and the City, which, of course, that must have been his bona fides to work on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because, hey, if you wrote for The Carrie Diaries, one successful prequel, let me just say, of course, Star Trek Strange New Worlds would be your jam. He also wrote for Charmed and The Magicians. I mean, because that in itself screams Star Trek. So, Henry Alonzo Myers is the co-showrunner of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So anyway, and as I'm looking around for this article that I want to read, that I can't seem to find it, and I don't know why. I know it's here somewhere on my desktop, but where did it go? Where is it? I'm looking, and I can't seem to find it, which doesn't make me look very good anyway. I have lots of things up. But so anyway, what was it? Here it is. I found it. Star Trek Strange New Worlds boss breaks down that number one reveal. Okay, now let me just say, I'm going to spoil the shit out of this episode. If you want, turn away now if you haven't watched Star Trek Strange New Worlds yet. And this article comes from Kaisha Hackett, and it was written on May 19th, 2022. It was published on tvline.com. Star Trek Strange New Worlds boss breaks down that number one reveal. There she is, number one, Rebecca Romijn's character, Una. The following contains spoilers from Thursday's Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Proceed accordingly. Thursday's episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds brought the Enterprise crew to an abandoned Illyrian colony named Hedimit 9. The humanoid species is known for modifying their genes, which is forbidden in the Federation, and they've lived as outcasts as a result. As Spock and Pike investigated what happened to the colony down on the surface, a light virus endemic swept through the ship up in space. Most fell extremely ill except for number one, a.k.a. Una, who recovered unusually quickly. While speaking with Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel about a potential cure, she revealed exactly why that happened. She herself is Illyrian. According to the Star Trek canon, is not to be taken lightly. Or pardon me, adding to the Star Trek canon is not to be taken lightly. And co-showrunner Henry Alonzo Myers says there was plenty of debate about confirming this aspect of her character. You're treading into difficult waters anytime you add something to this, he tells TV Line. We try very hard to think about what the consequences of adding to them are, and then we just have to do it. At the end of the day, you have to tell the story. For Myers, the most important aspect of the episode wasn't so much Una's big secret, but rather finding common ground between her and Dr. Mbenga. And at the end of the episode, Mbenga revealed that he'd been keeping his daughter, Rakia, who was diagnosed with signochemia, in the pattern buffer of the transporter until he found a cure. Actually, I kind of like that idea. It was really interesting when it was introduced in the 6th season TNG episode, Relics. This is a different way to go, but hey, nice to know you watch your Star Trek episodes. It's more about watching Una and Mbenga come together and come to understand each other, Myers explains. We knew that the episode would be a big Una episode, and we wanted to reveal something to the audience about her, he adds. It was a lot about defining who she is on the show and what kind of stories we can tell with her. Right? You know, why should I be pissed off about that? Why would that drive me to distraction? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they didn't think up number one's backstory. They didn't make that up. They didn't come up with Illyria. They didn't come up with the genetic engineering. They didn't come up with the fact that number one is genetically engineered. They didn't do that. They stole those ideas, and they did not credit where those ideas came from. All of those ideas came from a Star Trek novel called Vulcan's Glory that was published in 1989. It is the only Star Trek novel written by Dorothy Fontana. Who you might ask, is Dorothy Fontana? Well, Dorothy Fontana was one of the most important people in the original Star Trek. Dorothy Catherine Fontana was a writer and script editor who had the distinction of being one of the few people, this comes from Memory Alpha, the Star Trek wiki, one of the few people to have worked on Star Trek the original series, as well as the animated series and Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was her favorite Star Trek spinoff. She especially liked the show's strong characters, and when writing, Fontana often used pseudonyms, including Michael Richards and J. Michael Bingham. Fontana worked as a writer for a few television series before Star Trek, then briefly worked as Gene Roddenberry's secretary before she became a writer on the original series. The first episode she penned was Charlie X from the first season, based on a premise by Roddenberry entitled The Day Charlie Became God. Fontana wrote several notable original series episodes, including Tomorrow is Yesterday, and famously, Journey to Babel. This was, of course, the episode that introduced Sarek and Amanda, Spock's parents. She also went on to do a complete rewrite of The Ultimate Computer, this episode of Star Trek, second season, with Richard Daystrom, played by the great Blackula himself, William Marshall. I used to love Blackula when I was a kid. Building on my work. William Marshall was great in this episode. And of course, she also wrote The Enterprise Incident, but was heavily rewritten and did not dig that. Dorothy Fontana also created the one episode of the animated series that's considered canon, really, even though I consider the whole thing canon, Yesteryear, where Spock went back to the Guardian of Forever and met his younger self to teach him a lesson. She also wrote half the pilot for Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint. She is Star Trek royalty. Oh, and she also wrote the Deep Space Nine episode Dax from the first season of that show, which delved into Jadzia's past in a big way. That was one of her great specialties, was coming up with the backstories of characters. So when she was asked to write a Star Trek novel by then Trek editor David Stern, she leapt at the opportunity, and at Stern's behest, what was the book about? Well, it was about Spock joining Captain Pike, the first days where he joined Captain Pike on the Enterprise. That's what it was about. And in that book, number one, Una is revealed to be an Illyrian and to be genetically engineered. And the entire backstory of her character and the Illyrians was from that book. And written by Dorothy Fontana. I mean, now, if you work in television, and you pitch a story, like the Next Generation had famously an open submission policy, which meant if you wrote for Star Trek The Next Generation, you didn't necessarily need an agent. They would read scripts or hear pitches from everybody. Now, they learned then that they had to be very careful about the pitches that they took, because a lot of people have the same kinds of ideas. And they had to make sure that if they used a story, even if they used part of a story, if they'd met with a writer and somebody pitched them an idea and they used it, they had to make sure that that writer was credited. Now, there's all kinds of WGA rules and things, but they completely lifted all of number one's backstory from this book. And Mr. Henry Alonso, buddy, when you're talking and giving an interview and you're talking about where the backstory for this character came up and you're adding to Star Trek canon, it might be nice if you would attribute to where your fucking story came from. Not only that, give her a story. She deserved a story by credit on that episode. And she didn't have one. And now this brings up a big problem, and I think the most egregious abusers of this problem, I think it's a problem, has been modern Star Trek. has been the secret hideout era of Trek. Now, I once had a conversation with Bob Orsi back around the time, a little before Star Trek '09 came out. And I really liked him. He read Star Trek novels, so it's not like Alex Kurtzman isn't familiar with the fact that Star Trek novels exist. Star Trek novels. Now, let me just go back and say, as many of you know, a lot of our great franchises also have what are called media tie-ins. Novels or novelizations, comic books, all different video games, all different kinds of tie-ins that expand the lore, expand the universe. But they are usually not considered canonical in any way, shape, or form. I have long been a proponent of looking to some of that material to find stories. Now, Star Trek is the granddaddy of all. There are more Star Trek novels than novels from any other franchise, I believe. If I'm wrong, I stand corrected. I mean, I probably have 1,000 Star Trek novels myself. The first, actually it was the second one, but the first adult novel, Star Trek novel that was printed, was not Mission to Heratos, I know that was for kids, was this book, A Spock Must Die by James Blish. James Blish had been writing the Star Trek, the novelization, he was novelizing the episodes, and they were collecting them in Star Trek books, Star Trek 1, Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3. But this was an original novel he wrote, and it was published in 1970. Obviously, this is not considered canonical because it didn't really exist. But in the case of Star Trek, many writers who love Star Trek wrote Star Trek novels, and then that propelled them to other careers, and they became great science fiction and horror and fantasy writers on their own. But they started writing Star Trek novels because they really loved Star Trek. So for me, who started reading Star Trek novels as a little kid, I always have loved Star Trek novels. Now, when I was a kid, there was some dodgy Star Trek novels like Vulcan by Kathleen Skye, but Spock and a hot yeoman were being attacked by giant ants, and Spock has his phaser out. That was the original cover. So I'm a huge fan of Star Trek novels, and some of the best Star Trek novels could be easily adapted for movies and TV. Now, I have often wondered, why haven't they done this? Now, sometimes Star Trek novelists have been tapped in the past to work on the shows. Diane Duane, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, came on board The Next Generation, and she wrote the episode Where No One Has Gone Before. Now, Kirsten Beyer, who is a great Voyager novelist, is a co-creator of Picard, although we don't hear a lot from her working on the show. I wonder why that is. And David Mack, one of my absolute favorite Star Trek novelists of all time, has recently been a consultant on the first season of Prodigy. If you haven't yet, you should pick up. If you like Star Trek at all, David Mack's Star Trek novels are fantastic. I would recommend his Mirror Universe duology and his Destiny trilogy, also his Soong trilogy. But when it comes to tie-in fiction, now more than ever, people are mining tie-in fiction to use for other things, other formats. For instance, famously, our very own, well, not very own, I just say very own, Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy that was written in the early 90s, when it was decanonized by Disney when they purchased Star Wars. It was relegated to Star Wars Legends. They actually then later introduced Thrawn in the animated shows, things like in Rebels. And they've been alluding to that we're going to see Admiral Thrawn in the live-action Star, whether it's Ahsoka, Mandalorian. We're going to see Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now, here's a character it was Timothy Zahn created that character, and they've now brought him in to the fold. He's become a canonical Star Wars character, on-screen character, so far only in animation, but he's still canonical. And then Timothy Zahn was then brought back, and he is now written canonical to the new timelines, canonical Star Wars novels with Grand Admiral Thrawn, because that's the way you should really do things. Now, as I said, I have been a huge proponent. Marvel has been delving into published works to inspire and sometimes be the basis of their movies. Famously, Ed Brubaker's run on The Winter Soldier, he was pretty vocal about the fact that he didn't feel he was very well compensated for the fact that he created the Winter Soldier character. You can buy the Winter Soldier omnibus, and they go and they adapt it for the Winter Soldier movie. Now here's the rub. All of this tie-in fiction is done as work for hire. So when someone writes a Star Trek book, it is owned outright by the studio. It's owned by CBS. They own it. Now, the question is, whether legally or not, what is the right and moral thing to do? And I know you're gonna throw Bob Sugar at me. You're gonna say, "But Rob, it's show friends, not show business, not show friends. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate." Well, that's true. But if you're a writer, and you're in the WGA, Dorothy Fontana, before she passed away, by the way, she died a couple of years ago. She was a WGA writer. She was a fellow writer. And what they decided to do in Strange New Worlds was utilize one of the most famous, Dorothy Fontana was at the time the youngest story editor to ever work in Hollywood. And she was a woman. And in the mid-'60s, that was a big deal. And she obviously shaped Star Trek and turned it what it's become today. And her novel, Vulcan's Glory, was exactly where they looked to. And by the way, they didn't just look there to get Una's backstory and the Elurian backstory, all of that. Dorothy Fontana also in that novel defined Vulcan sexuality. And I, in my headcanon, this is absolutely correct, Vulcans can have sex whenever they want. They can only procreate once every 7 years. As I have said on this show, and people always come back and me, "That's not true, Rob. They can only mate once every 7 years." Yes, but I would think, I've never thought that Vulcans didn't have sex any other time. As a matter of fact, I always maintained, ever since I was younger, I've always maintained that Vulcans are probably some of the best lovers in the universe because they would see it as art, as expression. And they'd probably be very, very good at lovemaking. And but they can only procreate biologically. They must, the Ponfar, they must procreate once every 7 years. But they can have sex whenever they want. Dorothy Fontana also put that in Vulcan's Glory. She posited that and said, no, you're all wrong about Vulcan mating biology. You're not getting it. And she was the first person to come out and say that. And T'Pring is in that book. I won't go. Let me just say that I'm sure that Vulcan's Glory was one of the places that they looked clearly when they were trying to come up with this Strange New World show. Now, here's the question that I think we all have to ponder. As a writer, if I was a producer and I was hiring writers for my show, now, would I be paying them? Should they get if they're writing a script, if they are pilfering from a Star Trek novel that was written by Dorothy Fontana and literally taking out that backstory and using elements of that book and putting them into their scripts to the point where they're calling an episode The Ghosts of Illyria, and Dorothy Fontana came up with that? I would think that the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, the thing that any writer should want to do is say, give her a story by credit. Because people have gotten story credits for far less than Una's entire backstory. Story by Dorothy Fontana. And by the way, wouldn't that have made them look good? Like, oh my God. And then they can say, hey, because here's the thing. Discovery has been pilfering from Star Trek novels with no accreditation. They haven't said anything. Their whole second season with their evil AI Control. David Mack wrote a Star Trek novel, a Section 31 novel called Control. Well, what was Control, the series about? there was control, and he was an evil AI, It's crazy. The Guardian of Forever episode in Discovery, what do they do with that? Well, because they think they're so cheeky, they went and they used Harlan Ellison's original conception for the Guardian of Forever, because he was rewritten by Roddenberry and crew. So wait, we're going to go fix it on Discovery, and we're going to take his original conception of the Guardian of Forever, where he was anthropomorphized into a human form so he could wander around. We're going to use that. And they did. They changed the Star Trek canon back into Harlan Ellison's original idea. Now, here's the thing. Now, maybe that's cool, maybe it's not. I don't care if they do these things. Just give the original writers the credit or money. In the case of this episode, Dorothy Fontana's estate deserves some cash. Now, I understand when you write a Star Trek novel or any kind of tie-in fiction, the studio, owns it. You've agreed to do it. It's work for hire. But when people then go in to say your Star Trek novel and lift a great deal, or especially the entire backstory of a character, they could have written their own. They could have written their own backstory. They chose not to. And I'm sure because, hey, it's Dorothy Fontana, what more legitimate Star Trek novel to rip off than the only Star Trek novel written by Dorothy Fontana? I get why they did it. Uh-oh. Dogs have come in. I've been invaded. I've been invaded by animals. They were able to get through the door. All three animals are in here. And everyone's barking. And here's little Sebastian, Gilbert, and Tallulah. They're all here. The gang's all here. Why are you growling, Tallulah? So anyway, that's just hopefully they won't bark. Anyway. Oh, come on, Gilbert. Can't do this. I'll have to kick you out. But anyway, so my whole thing is like, what are the rules of engagement? And are I think as more and more of these shows look into using tie-in fiction, I think the authors who are writing these things need to be protected, because it's not fair. It's I guess you could say, well, Rob, it's creator rights, and if somebody takes the job knowing their work is going to be utilized in such a way, that's their decision. Well, I would say, okay, but TV screenwriters get paid a lot of money. And I wouldn't want my creators on a show to be looking to Star Trek novels for their ideas or their work or their backstory, because aren't I paying them to not use other people's ideas, but to come up with their own? Now, I'm usually the first person. I'm like, hey, Dorothy Fontana is no longer with us, but I'm all about hiring Star Trek novelists to come in and write for the show, or at least pitch ideas. I mean, I would have 5 Star Trek novelists if I was producing a Star Trek show. I'd put them on staff. I'd make them the story group, and I would just have them generate Star Trek stories. And I'm like, okay, guys, I need 10 stories by the end of the week. I'd come in there, I'd look at whatever ideas they came up with, and I guarantee you that they would probably come up with an entire season's worth of stories in a week that were canonically correct, respectful, and all that. But that's not how TV works. That's not how TV writers work either. But I was actually distressed seeing just how much, watching Spock's first name that was on those posters that they originally released for Strange New Worlds, and then they pulled them. Spock's first name was written by Barbara Hambley in her 1985 Star Trek novel Ishmael. I know Fred Bronson, who created, Robert April was not created by Fred Bronson in the Counterclock incident. Robert April was already cited in a lot of the Star Trek development material. But he said it was okay that Robert April was depicted. The character of Robert April was first depicted in the final episode of the animated series, The Counterclock Incident, written by Fred Bronson. So he said it was okay that they used Robert April. But you know what? If you're the first if you're the first guy to create, or girl or writer, however you identify, if you're the first person to create a character that gets used again, and the WGA has rules about this. If you bring back characters and things, there are rules. There are not rules governing the pilfering of ideas from Star Trek novels, and there's a lot of them. But here's the thing: I think it's gross, and I think it's unprofessional when you do interviews and you don't attribute where the original ideas for these characters came from. If you're talking about Star Trek canon and adding to the Star Trek canon, would it kill you to say in Dorothy Fontana's 1989 Star Trek novel, Vulcan's Glory, that Una's backstory was beautifully laid out and we decided to use it? What's wrong with that? You got something to hide there, Henry? You don't want people to know that? You want people to think you're a fucking genius because you wrote for Charmed and the Carrie Diaries, and now you're writing for Star Trek? You know what? Let me just say, it doesn't surprise me that you didn't attribute anything to Dorothy Fontana. I mean, I would hope. Obviously, you read the book. Maybe you never knew Dorothy Fontana even wrote for Star Trek before. Maybe you thought it was her only novel. Maybe you thought because she was dead, you didn't have to give her anything. The Guardian of Forever wasn't used until Harlan Ellison's wife was dead. And then they went back and they used Harlan Ellison's. If Harlan Ellison was alive and they went back and he found out that they used his original draft of City on the Edge of Forever that was then published as a comic from IDW, and you think he wouldn't have like flipped his lid and screamed bloody murder at the studio? Of course he would have. But and then of course David Mack wants to work for Star Trek because he's worked for Star Trek before. He was a consultant on Prodigy. So what's he gonna do? Go, guys, I wrote a Star Trek novel called Control about an evil AI in Section 31, and you did an entire season of Discovery about Control in Section 31. Yo, how about sharing a little wealth? Because clearly no one made that up. I wrote the book. It's right here. It's a Star Trek novel right here. And I think that you have to ask yourself, what is? I mean, do we want to have this as more and more people start writing these things and more tie-in novels are written? I mean, I think that there should be a policy. If you are a writer and you're going to pilfer ideas, plot points, character designs, I mean, you literally, now you have canonically made the character of number one an Allurian who is genetically modified. All of that came from Dorothy Fontana. Dorothy Fontana deserves some attribution for doing that. I mean, normally, when do you create Star Trek characters that and also, I mean, I guess it doesn't, you're using Pike, you're using Spock, you're using all of these, but those are previously established characters. Their traits were previously established in other filmed material. Her backstory was not, and it was created by Dorothy Fontana. And I know it's a very nebulous area, and who deserves what? It ain't show friends, it's show business. I just don't know why writers would not want to create something of their own out of whole cloth. Why steal? Why steal someone else's ideas from a different medium? I mean, you're getting paid the big bucks. So you're going to get paid for somebody else's ideas. Does that seem right? I don't know. I mean, all you have to do is, hey, story by Dorothy Fontana. She deserved it. She deserved that nod. But instead, nope. We got nobody. We got no one saying anything about anything. Look, I think now that comic books are being used, I think it was a damn shame that the Aliens versus Predator comic, the very first Aliens versus Predator comic that Dark Horse published, was not used as the basis for the first AVP movie. It would have been great if they had done that. It's got a really great story in it. And I honestly don't know why more of that doesn't happen. It's very frustrating when you see all this great material. I also don't understand how they make Captain America. Marvel's done a pretty good job. They even put people like Thanos' creator, Jim Starlin. Len Wein was in a scene in one of the X-Men movies because he created Wolverine. Filmmakers have done right by a lot of these people, but you know what does more right? Money and credit. So you'd think that hey, look, Star Trek, I already have a huge disdain for modern Star Trek for a number of reasons that you've heard over and over and over again. But my greatest disdain comes from this. It comes from these writers pilfering ideas, pilfering entire storylines from previously existing work that they don't credit the original writer. I think that's shitty, and I think it speaks to the character of the writer. And I think that, you know what, if you're a showrunner of Star Trek and you're getting paid the big bucks and you're going to go steal Dorothy Fontana's ideas, give her some credit. You know, I know you don't probably want anyone to know that she came up with those ideas, because why would you when they can be your ideas? Oh, wait, they're not. So anyway, really aggravating. And again, modern Star Trek, I'm telling you, not exactly practicing what you're preaching, are you? You'd think with all the posturing and all the inclusion and all the representation that they have on that show, or that they say they have on that show, they certainly don't represent a writer like Dorothy Fontana, who certainly deserved it, but didn't get it. Anyway, you understand where I'm coming from. I'm belaboring the point, but hey, why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised? Because it's par for the course with all of these people, and it really bothers me. Now, Undead Sick, our friend Undead Sick over in Holland, wrote a letter that I thought perfect to share. By the way, if you want to write a letter to me, you can go to postgeeksingularity.com. Postgeeksingularity.com. It's right down there. www.postgeeksingularity.com. You can send me a letter and I will read it on this show. Undead Sick writes in and says, "Hey Rob, I send this short letter to you because I want to share some thoughts. I just want you to know I saw your Modern Star Trek Doesn't Want to Hurt Your Feelings rant. And after watching it, I would just like to say that I will not be following Robservations for a little while. I love you and your channel, but what you are describing is a pretty nihilistic view of the world, and I would like to leave you with this thought. If people paid more attention to me in my youth and listened more to my actual feelings and have more of that empathy that you keep talking about, I might have turned out a better man. That's why I'll never share your opinion about all fictionalized stories, either Star Trek or something else, apparently having to be emotionless and undramatic. Because I'll tell you right now, being depressed and suicidal from being bullied and neglected hasn't worked for anyone. Certainly not myself. So as your latest rant really hit me on a personal level for some strange reason, I made this choice to tune out of Robservations for a bit. Nonetheless, I salute you from Holland. And hopefully, until next time, Undead Sick." Well, Undead Sick, first of all, I'm sorry you feel that way. You've been a faithful watcher and contributor of this channel, and see, even right now. But I would say this, sir. Sir, I don't know if you're a sir. You could not be a sir. I don't remember. However you identify. Here's the thing. I think that people should deal with their feelings. I think that people should always be in touch with who and what they are. But when you're watching a science fiction action-adventure show that uses allegory as a way of presenting a point, I don't need to see, I don't need to know, I don't want to hear all about all of these characters' traumatic backstories and what they've been through, especially because usually they're cliched backstories that you could hear. The way these characters are being written, they could be on any show at all. And they don't have to be in the 23rd or 24th century. The way that Star Trek Picard portrayed his mother's mental illness and subsequent suicide made no sense to me. In the 24th century, I didn't buy it. Just didn't buy it. I'm like, really? I mean, isn't the whole point is that 400 years hence that people will be able to get the help they need? That's kind of what medicine of the future is supposed to be doing. And yet they fall back on these tropes because the writers don't know how to do anything else. You know, tell me, if you want to show me trauma in the future, show me something new. The people that are going to live 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 years from now, that are going to be traveling amongst the stars, that are going to be constantly fraternizing with alien civilizations, and they're going to be contemplative of cosmic mysteries that we don't even begin to imagine today. If they're going to be out there doing that, they're going to be a very different kind of human being than we are now. And when we are constantly making these characters of today, having the same problems that somebody on This Is Us might have, or Modern Family might have, they cease to be interesting characters in a science fiction, adventure, fantasy context. And they're ordinary. They're generic. And a guy like Captain Picard, we're supposed to believe that his mother killed himself, or killed herself. And it just, you watch this stuff and I'm thinking, that this is not Captain Picard's backstory. This was, in fact, Patrick Stewart's backstory. And I understand Patrick Stewart wanted to make it more relevant to him. I understand that, but that's not great Star Trek. It's something else. But look, I'm not saying that storylines. I mean, I understand. You say here, Undead Sick, if people paid more attention to you in your youth, as you wrote, and listened more to your actual feelings, and have more of that empathy that you keep talking about, I might have turned out a better man. I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly with that. But, there's kinds of stories, when I'm watching certain stories, the people that are supposed to be populating Star Trek are better than us. And part of the whole idea of being an aspirational show is that these characters are far more self-actualized than we are. And they're the best of the best. Star Trek is a show, it used to be a show about the elite, the top percentage points, the smartest, the best people, because you need to be that way to be out on the final frontier. But so I am not saying, there's plenty of other places where you can go to see emotional stories about characters, but I really think that this insertion, the idea of a Mary Sue was the author inserting themselves into the story and creating an avatar for themselves. That's where the idea of a Mary Sue came from, and it really began with Star Trek fiction. Now, Patrick Stewart made himself a Mary Sue with Picard Season 2. And I think it's odd. I don't want to watch stories. When I'm watching Star Trek, I don't want to watch stories about myself. I don't want to watch stories about people that I know. I want to watch stories about people that I don't know, people that I might aspire to be. That's what I'm looking to see done. And I didn't mean it as a personal attack on you. And I certainly wouldn't say that people shouldn't be helpful of other people. I wasn't saying that at all. But I was talking about the fact that the writers of modern Star Trek are writing in the present day or present day iterations of human beings into their characters in the 23rd and 24th century, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And now, whenever somebody talks about their tragic backstory, I laugh because it's become a weird cliche amongst modern Trek, which is weird. I think it's odd. Here's another letter from our friend Bob Littlepage. I've been hearing enough good, or at least not that bad, things about Star Trek Strange New Worlds that I'm willing to check it out and judge it on its own merits. However, there's still the sword of Damocles hanging over this show, in the insistence of the producers that this mishmash is somehow part of mainline continuity, aka canon. If they just admit to the bloody fracking obvious that this and every other live-action show they've produced thus far they're all part of a massive reboot, at best an alternate timeline if you need an in-universe rationalization, make the point of divergence at the end of Enterprise's Stormfront Part 2, when they hit the big reset button on the temporal Cold War and the timeline reset. Kurtzman seems to be hiding behind "it's impossible to keep track of everything with over 50 years of material" as an excuse to not even try, or even go out of his way to outright contradict canon. Race swapping Robert April is a cherry on the non-canon sundae. Apparently, they also race swapped Chief Kyle into an Asian kid. Memo to Secret Hideout. Contradicting canon does not change canon to your version. It makes your version non-canon. Just admit it. And a lot of the fighting would go away. But then they wouldn't have that anchor of being tied to the old shows, would they? Standing by. Well, Bob, I'll tell you something. I don't even have a problem. Like, I really like the actor they picked to be Robert April. I'd love to see more of that guy. I thought he was great. But why? I mean, when you call him Robert April, oh, he was just in an animated series. I think you're right. I think what's going on here is they're actively trying to. They're trying to erase the old show. And the funny thing is, they're doing it the wrong way. You know how you would get people to get excited about Strange New Worlds? Make it really good. I mean, now it's just okay. So people are like, well, we're gonna watch this. It's great, man. Yeah. But winning changes everything. So I'll tell you, I as far as canon goes, they say it's hard, 50 years. I mean, they did it. What was really interesting is it didn't all match, but Star Trek went from the original series to the animated series to the movies to Next Generation to Deep Space Nine to Voyager, and then Enterprise was a prequel. They tried to do something different there, but it still had new characters and new situations. All they're doing, I mean, what they've done to Spock, we've now had 3 Spocks, 3 Pikes, 3 Uhuras. Why? Do something new. Show us something new. Give us new characters, new stories, new adventures. I mean, half the crew of the Enterprise, Pike's Enterprise, you pilfered from the original series, and it's bizarre. I don't understand it, but I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, Bob. Christopher Whitfield. Christopher Whitfield writes in and says, fellow shipmate Rob, I gambled and tried to watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds. After I watched, I thought, what does RMB think? I've never met anyone else that knows Trek better or understands it more. I feel we both have that in common. The first 5 minutes. Why is it that in the 23rd century, Montana has wind turbines? The future has antimatter and fusion that can push a starship to warp, but nah, let's have the Earth use wind power. He also loves to watch a movie from the 1950s and technically over 300 years old by the time of this episode. You asked why the producers and writers can't write good stories? I'm not sure if you're being honestly naive to the question or being facetious. Alex Kurtzman literally answered this in an interview. They don't care to write good Star Trek. They want to use the show and brand to push a woke Hollywood agenda, i.e. activism. The entire thing is for social justice warriors spewing their ideology. As you've stated, all shows hit on current issues, but they do it in an allegory. But Hollywood doesn't do allegory anymore. They don't bother to hide it. They preach to you. When a show praises how it hired writers based on the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, or if they have a rainbow flag in their office, this is a clear sign that you should turn the show off. A talented writer needs to only boast of their love of the craft and art. All I care about is, can you write a damn good story? Remember when it was really hard to get that chance to write a script or publish a story? Now all you need to do is say you're a black transgender gay person and you're in. That's interesting, being transgender and gay. That's why there is no good Star Trek. I knew Trek was dead when I saw a wheelchair rolling across the deck of the Starship Discovery. In the 23rd century, they still can't fix paralysis? Nah, but they can change your DNA structure so you can look like an alien race you've literally never interacted with before. How did they get that DNA? What a joke. Strange New Worlds is just another virtue signal. Pike walks on the bridge, the entire bridge crew is women. Because men are bad, women are powerful. Yet the original Star Trek put a woman as second in command of the Enterprise. Now you basically drown out number one and why she's an important character by having the crew so lopsided by women. Star Trek is a joke today. What it needs is Elon Musk to buy it and get rid of these talentless, overpaid fraudsters. Time to clean house. I do hope you read this letter, even if you don't do it on the show. I just want to share my thoughts. Oh, Christopher, I will absolutely read this letter on the show, as I just did. Look, I have no problems. Star Trek has always been about justice. It's always been about morality. It's always been about doing the right thing. And it did so in a fascinating, allegorical, science fiction, fantasy, adventure way. And it did it very matter-of-factly. I mean, I think everybody would say that when your species becomes spacefaring and you start dealing with other species, I mean, they showed a human woman married to a Vulcan, a literal interspecies relationship on Star Trek. I mean, no one thought that much about it because they both looked fairly human. But that was a progressive idea, and that it was the main character's parents. I mean, that was his established backstory. But to me, that shows there's a progressive stretch there that you wouldn't normally think of as being that progressive. But that's the whole thing. In the future, all of this is par for the course. All of this stuff is going. I don't know what is happening here. You can't have this. I'm sorry. You can't have this bag. But it was part of the course. So that's what the future would be all about. We would have squared away our petty differences. I mean, once we've moved out into the stars and we're starting to interact with people, I think nothing would get rid of our prejudices about our own planet quicker than having to deal with an alien race. I mean, they would look at us like, I know you could say that the Andorians called us pink skins or called Archer a pink skin, but it was literally because, Shran was insulting him specifically. I'm sure that he would have another insult for someone who was Aboriginal or from somewhere else. He would have something else to say. But I honestly think that that the thing about Star Trek was it presented things matter-of-factly. When you have Adira asking Stamets to call her by her preferred pronouns 1,000 years from now, I want to thrust my fist through the TV screen. Not because they're doing that, but because it's ridiculous that people would even have to make those comments in 1,000 years. Think about where we are now as opposed to where we were 25 years ago. Same-sex marriage is the law of the land. Maybe not for very much longer, but it's the law of the land right now. And shouldn't it be? I mean, shouldn't the ultimate form of humanity, all of our personal prejudices against one another, will eventually evolve away because they're pretty much stupid? I mean, yeah, we are genetically probably hardwired to look at people different than us and have a reaction because that's how things worked when we were being chased on the veldt, the African veldt or whatever, when you're running from predators or something. We were probably designed to be like-minded, but as our intellect grows, we're supposed to realize that, yeah, that's pretty stupid. We're all from different parts of the world, so we look different, Isn't that great? But we're all from the same planet. I mean, eventually we'll think that way. And those kinds of prejudices will eventually, hopefully, it can't come soon enough, but will be bred out of us. But, but like you said, the preachiness, the preachiness, we get it over the actual story being told. And that's where it falls down. I'm not digging it. Tiberius writes in. And let's see, Tiberius writes in and says, "Hello, Rob. I found your channel a couple of years ago, and I feel like I've found a kindred spirit when it comes to Star Trek. I'm 54 years old and grew up with the Star Trek of my youth. Subsequently, it's hard to put into words how this franchise came alive for me in December of 1979 when Star Trek the Motion Picture burst on the screen. As a 10-year-old boy, I was glued to my seat, and I still contend it is the most Star Trek-y movie of the series. I agree. So, in a way, Star Trek was reborn for me on that December day. On the other hand, it is also hard to put into words how I felt as I left the theater in May of 2009 after seeing J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. Oh, I'm sure I'm right there with you. Simply put, my Star Trek, the Star Trek I grew up with, died that day. You're not wrong. It has not returned or come back since, even with the launch of Picard, maybe only surpassed by the Star Wars sequel trilogy as the most disappointing sequel effort in my lifetime. The reasons are many. Star Trek, as you have mentioned numerous times, rises or falls based on the story and the writing. At its best, Star Trek simply tells great stories and is a commentary on the human condition. I never really noticed or cared about the 60s cheesy special effects when I got to watch episodes such as Space Seed, the Galileo 7, and Balance of Terror, to name a few. But even more than that, what drew me to the show, by the way, they weren't cheesy effects at the time they were made, they were state-of-the-art. What drew me to the show and kept me coming back to rewatch the episodes and the movies, mainly starring the original cast, is the consistency of the characters displayed by the writers and as portrayed by the actors. I remember vividly the moment Star Trek died for me while watching the 2009 movie. It was the moment Kirk, portrayed by Chris Pine, beat the Kobayashi Maru test. After blowing up the attacking Klingon vessels, he, while chomping on an apple, turns with a smug look and glares triumphantly at the test administrators. I have watched the Kirk character for most of my life, and to paraphrase Dr. McCoy in Turnabout Intruder, I have seen him in many different situations, but never as nonchalant or smug as he was in this scene. Oh, I completely agree. That scene completely misrepresents the Kobayashi Maru. If you look no further than the Kobayashi Maru scene in Star Trek 09 to see what a fundamental misunderstanding of Star Trek that movie actually is. I mean, and I couldn't agree with you more. That scene, I mean, my God, I was watching that scene going, really? You people don't even understand what's supposed to be happening here. And it was terrible. Terrible. The Kirk I knew and how I imagine it really was. Oh, hang on a second. Yeah, okay. The Kirk I knew and how I imagine it was in the prime timeline would have been sitting on the edge of his command chair, his eyes and attention glued to the screen, relishing the defeat of the entities threatening his ship and ready to deal with whatever contingency arose during the test. Not eating an apple, fake shooting a pistol with his fingers, and looking at the two-way mirror window. To me, all of the characters in my Star Trek displayed a remarkable consistency of character throughout the TV show and the movies, but Kirk's was the most obvious. A couple of examples: in Star Trek II, while in the elevator on the Enterprise with Saavik, she asks him if she may speak. After he responds by telling her self-expression doesn't seem to be one of your problems, she pauses and doesn't say anything. Before she says anything else, he says, "You're bothered by your performance on the Kobayashi Maru test." He had accurately read her and knew how to address it. Similarly, in Star Trek IV, when Kirk and Dr. Taylor are at the pizza place, and after they order their food and Kirk asks how she got to be in her line of work, and she replies, "Lucky, I guess," then falls silent, he says, "You're upset about losing the whales, aren't you?" She then comments on how perceptive he is. Now, I know that's a small thing, but it's not a small thing. It's called good writing, and we don't have that anymore because we've got the people that wrote the Sex and the Sequel prequel and worked on Charmed. Not that Charmed isn't a great show. I once knew the woman who created Charmed, but are these the people that are writing Star Trek? Let's think. Oh, yes, they are. Yes. And they also steal from other people's Star Trek novels that are better writers than they are. And they get paid to do it. Let's not forget that. Paid very, very well. Now, I know it's a small thing, but oh, how I miss that kind of consistency of character that just oozes from my Star Trek and is nowhere in the franchise today. They don't know how to write that way. That requires adult sensibilities that these people, all they've ever done is watch TV their whole lives. They need to read fucking books. You know what, as a matter of fact, I think all writers that are writing in television today, they need to stop watching movies and stop watching TV shows for a fucking year. And they should just concentrate on going back and switching it up. Read a modern novel and read a classic. A modern novel or a classic. And do that for a year. I guarantee you our writing, our TV shows would become better. I would trade all the lens flares and fancy upgraded special effects and bloated budgets modern Star Trek has for a tenth of the kind of character development we used to see. I don't know if it was a conscious decision on the part of the writers or Shatner bringing his own take on the character that allowed that consistency of character to develop and remain, but it is so sorely lacking in any of the iterations currently on screen. I would even go so far as to say that that particular aspect of Kirk's persona or character is why he fell in love with Edith Keeler. She possessed many of the same perceptive traits. These were on display when she remarks while talking to Kirk and Spock in the basement of the mission how they were out of place here or there, and then observes how Spock belongs at Kirk's side and how Kirk belongs in another place. Then after Spock tells Kirk he'll finish while Kirk walks Edith home, she remarks, "Captain." Even when he doesn't say it, he does. The look Kirk gives her at that point is of one who found a kindred spirit, his soulmate, someone who could read and understand him as he has read and understood so many others before. I can't put into words how satisfying that is to watch, over and over again, juxtaposed with how the character is portrayed as mentioned in the later films. This brings me to my last point. Yes, you can remain true to canon or story fidelity or in-universe treatments of franchises with simply paying attention to detail. I'm tired of all the Trek showrunners who treat or look on the vast canon of the show as a burden. All too often, the powers that be look for any excuse to work around or outright ignore it, because I guess it's just too hard. I'm sorry, that's lazy storytelling. Instead, they should be treating the rich canon of the show and movies, and even some of the print material, have developed as an intricate series of notes and stanzas that, when put in the hands of skilled storytellers and actors, becomes a symphony. I hope the franchise can recapture the magic and consistency of character I've so loved and described here. But with each new show that comes out, that hope gets dimmer and dimmer. In the words of Dr. Carol Marcus, thank you for your attention. Well, I have to say, I quite enjoyed this letter. This letter came to us from Tiberius. Well, thank you, Tiberius, for that. Look, dude, if this is what kills me. So on the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds, they're wearing their colors, and people who are ops and con, who are driving the ship, are wearing red. Pike's wearing yellow. Number one's wearing yellow, but they're wearing red. They're wearing the wrong colors. And I'm like, do you guys understand that these colors are delineating what department you work on? I mean, when you're on the bridge like that, Uhura's support communications, she was in red. But ops and con, these are command. And they're wearing the wrong colors. And I sit there and I'm watching it. I'm like, I understand that somebody probably made a decision and said, if everybody's wearing yellow on the bridge, it doesn't look right. Let's put people in red right up here flying the ship, and then Pike will be behind him. I just look at it and go, you're all idiots. You don't understand the command structure of your own ship or why people are wearing these colors. I know it's a little thing, but it just shows me that the people that are making Star Trek now, they don't give a fuck, or it doesn't matter to them. It looks better if they're wearing red. I get it, because you look at the shots of the bridge, they're in red because it looks better. Well, I'm like, but that's not what you inherited. If you're going to go with this color scheme, you really should know what blue and gold and red mean. But they don't. Clearly, and it's on display every episode. And people are like, well, Rob, that's very nitpicky. I'm like, no. Collectively, that's just one thing. But collectively in these episodes, there's 100 of those things in episodes. And it drives me crazy. I'm like, you guys wanted to make this show. You did it. It's your show. Why are you fucking it up? I don't know. I don't know. But when I see that, I'm like, you guys are not paying attention to your own show and mythology. It doesn't make sense. This next letter comes from Mark W. Harkness. Hello, Rob. I watched your show on the first episode of Strange New Worlds, and some commentary on a comment I left got me thinking. You see, I suggested that unless April had to be in the episode and also black, the change was not the right decision. I suggested that if you had that talented actor and needed him to play a fellow Starship commander, then why not make him Commodore Stone from Court Martial, dude? That would have been dope. I would have been all for that. Played by the great Percy Rodriguez. Oh, my God. It is if God created the devil and gave him Jaws. That was Percy Rodriguez doing the voiceover for the Jaws thing. So for those of you who don't know, in the episode Court Martial, Percy Rodriguez played Commodore Stone. One of the great things that the original Star Trek series did was cast black actors in positions of power, such as Commodore Stone. Didn't comment on it, didn't say anything, just showed Commodore Stone, who outranked Kirk, strong black man, played by Percy Rodriguez, who had one of the most badass voices any human being has ever had. And if you don't believe me, go right now and listen to the original trailer for Jaws. That's Percy Rodriguez. That's who played Commodore Stone. And you know what? This is a great idea. If they needed him to play a fellow Starship commander, then why not make him Commodore Stone from Court Martial? By the way, that would have been so much cooler, just so you know. A fellow commentator said that since April was only shown in an animated series episode, He didn't care for it then, and it didn't matter, and Star Trek fans should stop looking so silly, whining about reverse racism and wokeness. I was stunned. Someone who didn't know me, my only complaint was casting aspersions on my character. Well, that sort of hurts, but I wasn't going to be a jerk about it. I thought about his argument, and then I realized what kind of a show and what kind of people would bother with details no one cared about. And the answer was, well, Star Trek fans. There was a TNG episode where Geordi created a holographic simulation of one of the Enterprise D designers. But in the script, this wasn't Leah Brahms. Her name is Daystrom, as in a descendant of Richard Daystrom. But when they realized they'd hired a white actress, they didn't say, no one will notice, no one cares. They changed the name. Because to a craftsman, the tiny details are important. George Takei on TOS would say that new writers or directors would go to his panel and say, do this, and randomly push buttons and slap switches. George would say, you just destroyed the ship. These buttons do this. These switches do this. It was all fake, but George didn't say it didn't matter. He acted like it was important because that made his performance better because he treated it as real and important. And I want my Trek made by people who care enough to sweat the little things, just like their predecessors did. Oh, I figured out why, aside from his being an old white guy, they excluded Dr. Boyce. Because the Pike we see having left Starfleet to go horseback riding, and why is he in Canada and not the lush valleys of what used to be the Mojave Desert? Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started. Is a man clearly ignoring Boyce's words given to Chris when he was dealing with a real internal crisis? I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, who lives and who dies. And Boyce says a man either lives his life as it happens to him, meets it head on, or turns his back on it and starts to wither away. Well, the Pike at the start is the latter. He got a bad vision and he let it scare him? Come on. And the writers don't want you to think about the fact that Jeffrey Hunter's Pike was on that same ground of wanting out and for real reasons? And this was Boyce's answer. Great point. Great point, Mark. Write in more letters. Look, again, the cage was rejected by the network for being too cerebral. I mean, that's the conventional wisdom. I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know. But it was a very cerebral episode of Star Trek. But here's what I hate. The Cage is not canonical. Don't go back and watch The Cage thinking you're seeing the first episode of Star Trek. You are not. That was rejected. They didn't air that until 1988. The only way to watch Star Trek in continuity, and by the way, it's genius, is watching the Menagerie Part 1 and 2 where they replay The Cage in the context of Star Trek. You know what was great about that? It gave you Star Trek canon was born. You got a previous captain of the Enterprise. You got to see Spock's backstory. You got to see the Enterprise looking different. You could tell, ooh, time's passed. They made changes. It was great. I mean, what other show did that? And that was when great Star Trek canon was born. I mean, they've changed everything. And it's like, and it's not for the better. If it was for the better, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's for the better. It's never for the better. You've basically, like right now, if I was Captain Pike, and I'm on a planet and there's an ion storm rolling in, it doesn't matter where he is. He could say to Spock, you know, bro, nothing's going to happen to me. So we can go anywhere on this planet. Let's just go find shelter. Let's go over here. You know, even when there's creatures coming at him, nothing's going to happen to him. He's already seen the big thing that's going to harm him. So it's like you've taken away Jeopardy. Like every time something bad happens in the galaxy, they should just send Chris Pike there for the next 10 years because nothing's going to happen to him. Right? He's already seen what's going on. And like, what person in the world who has a vision of what's going to happen 10 years from now, if it's a horrible thing that's going to happen to them, if you've seen it happen, you can change it. No fate but what we make, right? Isn't that what we learned in Terminator? Apparently not this show. I mean, if I was Pike, I would say to Starfleet Command, I'm like, look, man, if there's a hot spot in the center of the universe, send me there because nothing's going to happen to me for another 10 years. So I'm good. Send me wherever you want. I am a trouble magnet that nothing, I will repel. It'll work in reverse. I'll repel everything that's next to me that nothing bad can ever happen to me. I mean, it's kind of where we're at. It's so weird. It's so bizarre. That was such a a horrible writing choice to like have him again. What are we going to do with Pike? Oh, I don't know. Let's refer back to the one thing that we know about his future and have him see it in Borath in the Klingon time crystals. I mean, it was a succession of a horrible writing ideas that they just and now it's like, well, your show has no jeopardy in it. Your jeopardy, no jeopardy. Yeah, not good. This one comes from our friend Enterprise HNCC 1701H. Birthday boy, greetings. I was thinking of what to write you for your birthday, and what better subject for a letter than a review of the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture, which, by the way, I love, and it's bonkers. If you guys really want to read some uncut Gene Roddenberry Star Trek, read the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture. And yes, he really wrote it, and he got paid $400,000 to do so. The novelization is a curious thing. It gives context to certain scenes in the movie by giving the readers insight as to what the characters were thinking. And there are plenty of unsettling things which, to me, read as fridge horror. I know that the critical drinker thinks that there's no conflict in Roddenberry's vision of the future, but that is not true. It's just more subtle. For one, Starfleet keeps secrets. They implanted a device in Kirk's brain to allow him to receive direct messages, and they lie about the Deltans being safe. McCoy left Starfleet because he felt that the brass should never have convinced Kirk to join them and give up commanding a starship. I don't know about you, but I find the idea of a device which can form memories as a means of relaying information absolutely terrifying. For the listeners at home, that scene at the start of the movie is captured by Federation drones and transmitted straight into Kirk's mind. Another thing of note is that people familiar with the spaceflight chronology will find that a lot of things from there find their origins in this book, like the space cities. In terms of flaws, I get the sense that Starfleet feels rather small in how the novelization was written. Almost all of the TOS crew is described as having a hand in designing the systems that are mentioned. I personally feel as though the story could do with a Larry Marvick to make things feel a bit more believable in an organization which has got all of the Federation's resources at its disposal. Speaking of which, the episode which he appears also features the Medusans. I can't help but feel disappointed that the story doesn't take the time to talk about the idea of using Medusan navigators, given that Deltans are, in this novel, portrayed as the best in that department. There's very little in terms of exploring, or if memory serves, even mentioning the movie's background aliens, like the Saurians, with most of the focus on the Deltans and the Vulcans. Even then, Earth and the Sol system seem to be the most compelling, if a bit sparse, but to his credit, Roddenberry does plant the seeds of intrigue on more than one occasion. Unfortunately, canon never makes use of it. That concludes my concise review of the novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture. I hope it was a satisfactory birthday gift, given your love of the work. Well, thanks for that, Enterprise H. First of all, I think that those are really minor to me. Although good points, salient points. What I love about the novelization is, I mean, the fact that you have love. Kirk's mother had a love instructor, and that, see, to me, those kinds of things, like, I would love to I would love to have heard of more of Roddenberry's vision for the future, because there's a lot of it in the novelization for Star Trek the Motion Picture. There's also the whole idea where he kind of plays into slash fiction. I think it's Thahila. Thahila is the Vulcan word that means brother, friend, or more. And many a slash fiction story was fueled by that. What is it? It's like a subtitle. What's it called? Like a footnote about this. And there's a lot of wacky stuff in that book, and it's definitely worth reading. If you want a fun time, read the novelization for Star Trek the Motion Picture. And by the way, the 4K director's version is in theaters this week, so check it out. Check it out. Now, here's a letter that's not Star Trek related. Joe from Montreal writes in. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Hey, Rob. I'm done. Good for everyone who loves all things multiverse, but I'm finished with it. Spider-Man started it, Morbius ruined it, Doctor Strange confused it for the regular folk, and the Loki TV series shit the bed. Having just mulled over the new Doctor Strange movie, I realized that I have no idea what Marvel is doing. Is this multiverse angle going to be the standard plot point in everything from now on? Why do I have to watch a TV show to understand a movie? Why do they keep changing the rules from film to film? I thought Spider-Man was erased from all memory, unless, I guess, you're a sorcerer. When Strange and Wong name-drop him in front of America Chavez, I sat there rolling my eyes, thinking of all the complicated rules that were set up in Spider-Man. Now, wait a minute. Everyone knows who Spider-Man is. They didn't erase Spider-Man at all. They only erased Peter Parker. Everyone knows, I'm sure Doctor Strange knows, he's fought along Spider-Man in the Infinity War, but he doesn't know who Spider-Man. If you were to ask Doctor Strange, who's under Spider-Man's costume? He's like, I don't know. So, but I feel you. I feel you. When Strange and Wong name-dropped Spider-Man in front of America Chavez, I sat there rolling my eyes, thinking of all the complicated rules that were set up in Spider-Man. Don't they have someone following this, taking notes, making sure one thing does not contradict the other? I mean, Lucasfilm mucks it up all the time. You'd think a well-oiled machine like Marvel would be on the ball. Do all of these films get a free pass because they're Marvel? Mobius, thankfully, Mobius. No, it's Morbius. Thankfully, got a stake through its heart. But does the actual MCU get off the hook? And those cameos. Spider-Man did the cameo thing right, giving them purpose. Here they were for shock value, no heft or any weight, just a big bag of fan theories that may or may not play out in the future. Can we just get a regular Iron Man type of movie again? Please? That's from Joe from Montreal. Joe, right there with you, buddy. You go back and watch, we watched Iron Man for John Campia's movie club. And you go back and you watch that movie and you're struck by how simple it is, how straightforward. It's just a great, simple story of a man coming to grips with himself and asking himself what he believes and what does he want out of life. And it's also a superhero movie. So it's really good. I really liked it. And watching it again, you realize, yeah, but by wanting to come back to that, I can totally see that. I totally feel you. Let's see. You know what? This is not a letter, but it's from, man, I'm never going to get this name right. Ole Jorgen Skinderhog. It's a great name, by the way. But there's no way I could never pronounce that name as much as I might want to pronounce it. I could never pronounce that name correctly. But there's a video that he wants me to share that I'm going to share. And it is about the long, complicated history of Doctor Strange and Pink Floyd. I'm sorry that I can't. I'm going to put this right into the live chat so you guys check it out. I got to check it out too. So there you go. It's in the live chat. Check it out. And we shall see. But I want to thank you for writing in. Thanks for sending that in. I love when people send me stuff that I don't know about. This comes from Travis Willock. Travis Willock says, "Hey, Rob, hope your battle with COVID is going well as it can. I'm defeating COVID. Thank you very much. Today, I actually can get through a sentence without coughing. Just wondering if you've had the chance to check out the insane Taiwanese horror film, The Sadness, yet. Oh my God, I have not seen this. I cannot wait to see this movie. Dieter Bastian's going to order me a 4K copy of it. I know I'm going to love it. It's on Shudder right now, and man, it's a trip. One of the horror outlets called it the most depraved zombie film ever, and while it's not really a zombie movie, it's pretty messed up, but in a crazy way, if that makes sense. Anyway, it's something else and heralds the arrival of an exciting director, in my opinion. By the way, I've been a fan of yours since I caught Free Enterprise on cable when I was a kid, and still proudly own my Anchor Bay Special Edition DVD. Get well soon." Well, thanks, Travis. I appreciate that. Hopefully we'll get Free Enterprise out in 4K. I'd love to do a definitive version of it. Maybe one day I will. I hope to soon. Thanks for writing in. Let's see. This one comes from Patrick. Patrick says, "Greetings, Rob. Perhaps you can explain to me and the rest of the community the reason why an actor must give permission to use content which had been shot for a series they may no longer be a part of. One example I can think of is the issue regarding Terry Farrell in Deep Space Nine. The montage in the series finale had to omit all references to Jadzia Dax because the producers could not get permission from Miss Farrell to use any of the Season 6 footage that had been shot. I believe she was burned by the producers earlier in the series for using audio clips of her performance without permission. I can understand that there may be a residual fee for creating new content by using archive footage, but wouldn't the original footage be property of the production company to use as they please? If you have any insight into this, please share. I have been bewildered by this for ages. Well, Patrick, let me tell you something. The reason is you can't, if you put archival footage into a new episode, that means it's new. That archival footage is being used as part of a new episode, and the actor needs to be compensated for it. And if they speak in the archival footage, that means they probably have to get billing. Like literally their name, they have to get credited for playing their character, which means more money. It seems odd, but it's true. I mean, you can't just put somebody into a TV show and not pay them, especially a former principal actor. They have contracts that specify that kind of thing. So it's not just, you're not just using footage, you're using it in a new context. And you have to do that with anybody. You know, anybody that, if you were going to use archival footage of somebody in a TV episode and they're still alive or something, unless they're a public figure and that footage is in the public domain. Terry Farrell being used in Star Trek, if they were going to use her archival footage in a new episode, damn right she's going to get paid because it's new. It's not, you're recontextualizing her her past work, and you're using it, you're showing her in another episode. Even though the footage might be owned by them, it's not, they don't have the rights to use that footage over and over again in other episodes and not pay her. That's just how it works. But that's a really good question. A really good question. Let's see what you guys are saying. People are firing in all kinds of questions and super chats and things. Let's jump over to that. I want to see what's going on in your beautiful minds today. We shall see. Let me get back here and wow, there has been a lot of you firing in super chats and tips. If you want to do that, let's jump over and see where they're at now. Anonymous. Oh, Braxton, that means it's Calvin Bowles. You're not anonymous. Come on, dude. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry that this is not as pretty as it should be. Let me just edit this shot down a little bit, and so I can pull it down and bring it lower. So there you go. Because that was driving me crazy. Let's go. Braxton asked in Star Trek 3, why on the Genesis video was Kirk and not Carol Marcus giving the talk? And when did Kirk have time to make and transmit the talk? They should have just used the original video from Star Trek 2. It's funny that you say that. I did not plan this question. So everybody remembers the Genesis video. Carol Marcus presents that video. It's her presentation of Genesis. You know, Bibi Besh is the actress that played Carol Marcus, mother of Samantha Mathis, by the way. And same thing is true for the question that I just answered about Deep Space Nine. If they had included her in the movie, they would have had to pay her and give her billing. But by reshooting that footage with William Shatner, then they don't have to pay him. Or they don't. He was already getting paid. But they would have had to pay Bibi Besh, and they would have had to give her credit, which means that she would have had residual payments and all kinds of things. And so that's why they reshot it. But that's a great question, Braxton. A great question. NRJ 1984 says, any rumors when more Trek films will be released on 4K? Hope you're feeling better, Rob. I've heard things. I mean, I think they have said that the director's edition of Star Trek: The Motion Picture will come out in September. I would imagine they'll release the rest of the movies in 4K by then. But don't quote me on that, but I would think that would be a good bet. Who knows? Mattuine says, how you doing, Mattuine? Says, Rob, great to see you. You're doing better. COVID is bad enough without suffering vapid parasitic Trek writing. Next up, Kenobi. Fingers crossed. Man, that's coming. Kenobi is coming next week. Fingers crossed. I think it's going to be good. I can't wait. The Watcher of Az says, the king is back. What can I say? Long live the king, baby. I'm back. I'm feeling better. Hopefully I'll be back on the John Campy show. But yeah. Joseph Michael sends in a super chat. That's very nice of you, Joseph Michael. Thank you. What are your hopes for the upcoming Star Wars series, The Acolyte? It's set around 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace during the High Republic era. Is it during the High Republic era? Is it supposed to be then? I mean, my baseline, for those people who accuse me of something else, my baseline is always that something will be good. I want things to be good. I don't want things to be bad. It bothers me when things are bad. All the work and all the time and the effort that goes into things, it's always better when they're better. So I want The Acolyte to be good. I think it has a really interesting premise. And let's make it good, man. Let's make it good. Because why not? Don't you want it to be good? So, fingers crossed. King Roman, one of two. Hi, Rob. I hope you're well. Oh, yeah. After 44 years on this earth, I did something for the first time. I purchased a comic book. Wow. Well, you might call it a trade paperback. In anticipation of the next Thor film, I bought all 5 volumes of Thor by Jason Aaron. Are you familiar with his run? And if so, would you mind sharing some thoughts? Oh, I am familiar. I loved Jason Aaron's run on Thor, but I mean, I don't know if you've read it or not. I don't want to say much. I loved his take. I loved his take on Thor. It is a lot of fun. And there's a lot of big ideas in it, but I don't want to ruin it if you haven't read it yet. Because you didn't say you had, but it's great. And, I keep meaning to get the omnibuses for that run. I don't have that run in hardcover yet, but I should get it. It's a great series. You're going to report back. Tell us what you think. I'd be curious what you think of it. Jim Wiley says, please, no more Khan references to Star Trek. I mean, okay. First of all, this has got to be an Akiva Goldsman thing. Why the fuck is there anybody who's related to Khan, Nooney, and Singh on the goddamn Enterprise? I mean, really? Really? It's so lame. No one's talked about Khan, Nooney, and Singh in 300 years. That's the whole cool thing about when the Enterprise discovers it in Space Seed. Now it's like, oh yeah, look, your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's here, buddy. Or she won't be on the ship anymore, apparently. But, I mean, this is another thing. I wasn't going to bitch about this, but Khan's descendants are running around. I'm sorry, but the whole point is that the Khan's descendants all left on the Botany Bay. Everyone else probably, I would imagine, because Spock alludes to this, all of the genetic super people were hunted down. There's no descendants. They were hunted down, put away, whatever. Spock says, would you reveal to war-weary populations that 70 or 80 or whatever it is, Napoleons are still around? I mean, the idea that she even has a descendant, or that she's a descendant of Khan, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of kids running around, but give me a break. It's so lame. Why does everybody have to, refer back to Khan with everything? I agree, man. Jim, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Enough with the Khan references. Enough with your uncreative claptrap. You always have to go back to one fucking episode. I hate it. Let's go back. Oh, Pike. We're going to use Captain Pike again. We're going to use him in the 2009 movie. We're going to make him a character in the Discovery. And look, never has a TV series got greenlit based on the charisma of one man until now. God bless Anson Mount. He's great. I don't know what they're doing with his hair because that just doesn't happen. I don't know if it's really military. I just don't get it. But hey, it looks great. It's great. Michael Strathmore says, does Fred Bronson get paid for Robert April now? Good question. I would imagine probably not, because with animation, it doesn't work like it's a live action show. But yeah, I'd be curious about how the WGA would see that. But because it's animation, he's not covered. But it'd be interesting to see if that would work out. Michael Owen says, hey, Rob, let's play make-believe and say that there was no Star Trek anything after Enterprise until Strange New Worlds. How do you think your psyche would fare in that reality? I wonder if it would make me a 0.5 closer to being points closer to being happy. Michael, I would hate it. I would hate it if only because of the sets. not because they look different, but because they're ridiculously huge. Here's another problem with modern Star Trek. I don't believe any of it. I don't believe that when the producers are showing me the roller coaster turbo lifts that exist in a bunch of empty space, I'm like, do you guys know how physics works? Do you know how somebody would build a ship? There would not be empty space with turbo lifts. I mean, anti-gravity lifts like that do not run on rails, first of all. And when I look at this, I'm like, these assholes don't even understand. They can't even give us a fictional starship that you can believe in. And I feel that way about the size of the sets. I understand they want to be able to give you these big dynamic shots, and that's why the sets are so big, so they can pull the camera back. And I get that, but it strains credulity. That it doesn't make any sense. You would not build a starship with sets that are that with that much empty space. That's not how ships are built. Well, Rob, in the 23rd century, how do you know? Because the laws of physics are still the same. You know, shipbuilding you don't just have a bunch of however much you've got to deal with things like propulsion and energy, and it's just ridiculous. I can't deal with that. Mikey Lito says, adapted from a story by DC Fontana. Does it say that? Am I wrong? Do they give her credit? Is it actually in the episode? Does that invalidate? I don't know what you're saying. But that's exactly what it should say. Adapted from a story by DC Fontana. Does it say that? I hope it does. That would be great. Then my bitching and moaning and complaining is all for naught. But that's all it has to say. Does it really say that? Because that would be awesome if it did. 3D Trekker sends in a super chat and says, New Trek, so-called, doesn't know how to create. They only know how to destroy. Canon to them means nothing as well. Yeah, well, the funny thing is everyone thinks we get so wrapped up in canon. But the thing is, Star Trek, beginning with the Menagerie, gave us a history. It's ironic that they keep going back to Pike and young Spock, because the Menagerie, that 2-part episode, gave us Star Trek canon. It gave us a history. It gave us a whole the lineage of starship captains and all of that. That would be, it's fantastic. And that's part of the reason that Star Trek fans are Star Trek fans. The fact that there is that canon makes the show a lot more fun for us. And you're right, 3D Trekker. I mean, I don't understand why they don't do more of that. Jeff Bingham sends in a tip and says, I have to imagine you're familiar with the Emmanuel series based on the eponymous novel. They're doing a new adaptation starring Leah Seydoux. Not sure how you feel about it, since you've said you'd rather see new erotic content over reboots. You mean this Emmanuel? The original Sylvia Crystal Emmanuel? This is the 4K European box set of the Sylvia Crystal Emmanuel movies. Yes. No, I'm excited. Whether or not the woman who wrote that book really wrote it or her husband did is immaterial. I would love to see. I love that they're making an Emmanuel movie. Again, I think that would be amazing. For those of you who don't know, I'm a big fan of the Emmanuel. Emmanuel was a series of films. I mean, there was the original movie starred Sylvia Crystal, and I think my favorite one is Emmanuel 2. Emmanuel 1 and 2. Emmanuel 3 is a real letdown. But Emmanuel 1 and 2 are these directed by Just Jochen, or Just Yakin, however you pronounce his name. They're great softcore erotic films from the 70s, and I love them. And then, of course, they made all different Emmanuel movies. Emmanuel in prison movies, Emmanuel in the jungle movies. I mean, all kinds of Emmanuel movies with Laura Gemser. Then there's Black Emmanuel. There's all kinds of great stuff. But yeah, I'd love to see a great erotic film, like we always talk about on this channel. Where's the eroticism? Bring it back. Bring it back. Jeff goes on to say, any chance for a member call tomorrow? I'm going to try and do a member call tomorrow. I might have to push it to Sunday after Let's Get Physical Media. Might have to do that. Darth Plato says, you're absolutely right about giving proper credit. What current Trek writers is doing is beyond atrocious. Not giving credit to original ideas is the least of what they've been doing. Yeah, you're right. I agree. I mean, look, It doesn't cost anything to give people credit. There's one thing I've learned as a producer in the entertainment business. Give people their due. Put their name on the screen if they've done something. You know what? If you have a great PA, make sure your PA staff gets up there. You know what that does for people? It goes a long way. I mean, money goes further, but it goes a long way. I completely agree. Ben Johnson became a member of the channel. Thanks, Ben. Good to have you. The Jughead, how are you, sir? One of two. Hi, Robert. Regarding the title of this broadcast, anyone that has contributed to this wonderful franchise that we love so much, of course, should receive his or her due. Remember DC Fontana? Love and respect from the UK, brother. Well, thanks, Ben. Always good to hear from you, Jughead. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, yesterday's Enterprise done today. The Enterprise sees Captain would have a tragic backstory. They wouldn't go back in time to save the timeline. They would just cry about their predicament, probably. I mean, again, it's so weird. It's weird that people on the edge of the final frontier would bitch and moan and complain about their tragic backstories. I don't get it. Darth Plato says, have you seen the latest Strange New Worlds episode? I did. The underlying commentary is on marginalized people, augments, Illyrians, having to hide who they really are as a guard against intolerance. Perhaps not postmodernist per se, but it does tap into the current zeitgeist. Oh, there's no doubt about that. But, how about the fact that hiding who you really are and what they're basically saying is that it's okay. It's who you really are. So it's okay you lied to Starfleet. I mean, the thing is, it's so badly done and it's so clumsy. What they should have been really addressing is, here's a really fascinating idea. Genetic engineering is going to become a reality in our lives. We've all seen the movie Gattaca. It would have been really interesting to have an episode where the Illyrians and what they do is debated. I mean, the idea of human beings, because the eugenics wars, well, we just banned genetic engineering, which is something that has been going on because obviously Julian Bashir was genetically augmented. Augmentation that way is a fascinating idea. Let's debate it. Let's debate whether or not, rather than just say, well, Earth banned it, and, oh, you Illyrians, you allowed it. I mean, it would be really far more interesting if they actually, hey, why are you barking? What's going on there? Can you not get out of the door? Did it close on you? Gilbert? What's happening? But it would be far more interesting to debate that issue. Do a whole episode about genetic engineering, the ins and outs of it. Because if you could make people better, wouldn't you? I mean, genetic engineering. Look, if I wrote a Star Trek episode today, I would write a Star Trek episode about all the benefits of genetic engineering, and make it kind of chilling, and make it a happy-go-lucky episode, but really have a dark undercurrent. Because, I mean, obviously in the 20th century, we extended human life almost by 30 years through medical technology. So, yeah. But yeah, I can understand, but it was a very small part of the episode, and I thought they did a really shitty job incorporating that into. It'd be it'd be better that why are the Illyrians wrong? Why is genetic engineering wrong? The Illyrians didn't think it was wrong. I mean, obviously they're portraying it as something if number one wasn't genetically engineered, she wouldn't have gotten over that disease, the disease of light. But she did. Tom Jr. Jackson says, so is genetic engineering bad? Tom Jr. Jackson said, is there a Midnight Musings or Member Zoom? I think there's going to be Midnight Musings tonight. I hope so. I want there to be. Josh Rosowskis says, hey, bud, hope you're feeling better. Check your Twitter DMs. I made you a little something for your birthday, but you haven't seen it yet. Oh, Josh, I will check that out. I'm sorry I haven't seen it yet. Not giving the great DC Fontana credit is the crime of the dishonorable. I agree. Chris, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Jason S. says, Rob, I hate to hear that you got caught with your mask down again, which probably ruined your Abortion Survivor Day celebration. Can we get another one of those classic mask rants that you used to do every day on your show? Well, Jason, I see what you're trying to do there, but you know what? If I had worn a mask in my own house, I wouldn't have got COVID. I don't understand. We have doctors, and when doctors go to work on you in a hospital, they wear masks. It's not necessarily a bad thing to wear masks, and they do it in Asian countries all the time. When you're sick, you wear a mask, and so yeah. And in terms of ruin my abortion Survivor Day celebration, yes, for those of you who might wonder what that's all about, I'm adopted, and I happened to discover when I met my biological mother that she was actually in the waiting room to have me aborted. And the reason, though, I should say this is extra added commentary. The reason that my mother was in California in a waiting room to have me aborted is because she was over 5 months pregnant before she knew that she was pregnant. Why did that happen, you might ask? Well, she was on the University of Washington track team, and so it's not unusual for female athletes to skip their periods. And she did not know that she was pregnant. So when she found out that she was pregnant with me during her second trimester abortions were illegal in Washington State. Now, so my doofus of a biological father who I've never met, but he was an asshole, sends her by herself to get an abortion. And she was sitting in the waiting room about to have the procedure done in moments and decided she couldn't go through with it. And so she left and had me. I am completely pro-choice, but I don't believe in abortion 100% of the time. Unless there's you have plenty of time, there shouldn't really be second or third trimester abortions. You should be given enough time and enough consult with your doctor and mull it over on your own to see where you want to be. And it should be a decision for you to make on your own. But I unless there's medical danger to the mother, I don't believe in third trimester abortions. I think, by that time it's a different situation entirely. Gilly, why are you barking? But that's just me. But yes, my mother was going to have, I would have been a second trimester abortion, and that would not have been pleasant. And I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad she had the choice to do what she wanted to do because it was her body, her choice. I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd been her kid. I don't know. It would have been different. Simon Peters says, I propose that we go on to Paramount and protest that our Rob should be given the title of Star Trek Consultant Czar, a.k.a. the Kevin Feige of all Star Trek. By the way, I'm so confused on what Uhura I want to date tonight in my youthful fantasy. Well, I don't know, man. For me, my first crush in life was Nichelle Nichols, was Uhura. But yeah, they've done it. I think you know what? I'll say it. I love the new actress that they have playing Uhura. I think she does a great job. It's just so weird that they have to they could have created a new character, but no. Not only do we have Uhura, but oh wait, she's got a tragic backstory. Her poor family all died in that old chestnut, a shuttle accident. Come on. Wow, that was creative. There you go. That was really creative. Unfortunately, Simon, the only TV I've ever worked in, I directed 5 episodes of a show nobody wants to admit exists anymore because it would get Me Too'd out of existence, was Femme Fatales. And I've never worked in TV, so while I've been a Star Trek consultant for licensing, Viacom licensing, and I worked on Star Trek documentaries for CBS for 3 years, and I did work on the Star Trek Experience for 2. I don't know if I'm qualified. I mean, I could tell you if I was in a writer's room with writers like Akiva Goldsman, he would hit me over the head with his Oscar within 10 minutes. Because there's one thing, I'll tell you something. I know a lot of TV writers, and God bless them. I love them. But they're not going to listen to some schmucko Star Trek consultant telling them what to write. Trust me on that. It would go not well. Poochie Pooch sends in a tip and says, just want to say hi, Rob, and happy 800th. Well, so thank you. So happy things are going well, aside from you-know-who, and your handsome mug and sultry vocals always make me grin. Take care, Bobbert. Well, Poochie Poo. Or what is it? It's Poochie Pooch. Poochie Pooch? Well, I'm glad. Things are going well. And thank you for saying I have a handsome mug. I appreciate that. And thanks for supporting the channel. Squadracourse says, happy birthday. For fan fiction, Paramount owns all the Trek things, but what about the original story elements, plots, characters, places, etc.? Yeah, I mean, look, when you're work for hire, everything that you create is owned by Paramount. And it's all free game. But you know what? It still was written by somebody. And give that person credit. If you're going to go in and literally lift out an entire backstory for one of your principal characters from another writer and not give them credit, that's so unethical and so not cool. Legally, it might be correct, but I mean, from one writer to another, and especially, it's not just any writer as far as Trek is concerned. It's Dorothy Fontana. How cool would that be? I think it'd be great. Darth Plato says, the question of why Kirk is speaking on Genesis instead of Carol is a good one. I think the in-story answer is that Kirk made an updated presentation as part of a submission to the Federation Council and or Starfleet. Carol's speech is more pure science. Oh, I agree. I think in universe it works just fine. I mean, I think that, but I was asked that question, so I answered it. Michael Strathmore saying that Nick Locarno becoming Tom Paris, stealing or okay. Well, what Michael is referring to is that Robert Duncan McNeil, who played the character of Nick Locarno in the TNG episode First Duty, which, by the way, is a great TNG episode. I don't think Wesley Crusher was ever better than he is in that episode. Great Wesley and Picard interaction there. When they created the character of Tom Paris for Voyager, they were going to have it be Nick Locarno. And that's why Robert Duncan McNeil had the part. And then they changed it, and I'm sure that was done. Was it stealing? I mean, they made the decision because the person who created Nick Locarno, based on WGA rules, would get paid every single episode. They would have had to have made him a producer. Now, they changed the character. It's the same actor. It's clearly supposed to be the same character, but they changed that character, and they changed his name. But is it stealing? Probably. But they still changed the character's name. And right or wrong, he's not the same character. So I would have kept his name. I mean, I know they wouldn't want to pay, but it's still that's a tough one, Michael. But they did change his name. So you can make the claim, well, this character is just like, no, it's a different character. But it's true. Simon Peters says, I've got to get this off my shoulders. First, I have nothing personal against George Takei, but I can't respect his disrespect of William Shatner. Last I remember, Bill was the top billed star and central character of the TOS and the movies, not George. Tell him, Rob. Listen, I love George Takei. You know, I do. But you're right. I mean, these were guest stars, and Shatner was the star of the show. And you know what? I mean, Star Trek was never a number one show. It was always beleaguered. The weight of that was on even though if they knew what demographics were then, they probably would have kept Star Trek around because it had such a big college audience and sweet spot for advertisers. But yeah, it's a bummer. What do you think, Tallulah? Come here. So yeah, I think that's I mean, the idea that you're going after the star of the show is silly. I mean, the fact that George Takei, hey, he got to be in a Voyager episode. William Shatner wasn't in a Voyager episode. I mean, he was dead, but I mean, Kirk was dead. So it all evens out in the wash. But I think it is silly. I think it's silly for them to. I mean, so Bill Shatner's a star. So he is who he is. I love Shatner. I love working with him. I'll always love him. He's still a hero to me. Stub McShave says, with actors getting compensated for archival footage, does that mean that Trials and Tribulations is the latest Trek movie or TV show that Shatner got compensation for? That's a good question, Stubble. From what I understand, Shatner and Nimoy were both bought out, meaning at one point they were given a substantial, we're talking into the millions and tens of millions of dollars. They both got a payout. which their likeness rights were completely bought out forever, which is probably a smart thing to do. I don't know if that I don't know if that was before Trials and Tribulations or after. For those of you who don't know, Trials and Tribulations was the 30th anniversary episode, Star Trek episode that was done for Deep Space Nine, and to honor the 30th anniversary, they revisited the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. It's brilliant. It holds up beautifully. It's a great. That's another thing. The classic Enterprise, the NCC 1701 that Kirk commanded, was canonical in Deep Space Nine. They didn't have a problem with that. So, I don't know. Oh, Michael Leo's back. He said, my bad. I was saying that's what it should say. Oh, whoosh. Yeah. It should have said based on a story by Dorothy Fontana. I'm glad that it doesn't, because I would feel like a tool making this episode. But yes, it absolutely should say based on a story by Dorothy Fontana, because it is. It absolutely is. People have gotten story credits on TV episodes for a lot less. So, yeah. Paul in Long Beach says, happy 800th show, my friend. Also, happy belated anniversary of show 98, titled The Very Last Star Trek Discussion, the very last Star Trek Discovery discussion ever. Just feeling nostalgic for some reason. It's been a wild 3.5 years, dude. Cheers. Well, Paul, thank you. Hey, we're not talking Star Trek Discovery. I can't stay away from Star Trek. I can't quit. RRTNZ says, hail Bob, maybe Star Trek Strange New Worlds writers mistook the Enterprise interior for the TARDIS, space-wise. I once visited the old Enterprise carrier, very cramped. Yeah, man. Why would you build a spaceship with all of that open space? It doesn't make any sense. You would use it for cramming more equipment. I mean, my God, the captain's quarters it's ridiculous. It's crazy. But that's funny. RRTNZ. Chase O says, hi, Rob. I hope you're feeling better. I am feeling better. What do you know about Marvel Earth 666? Marvel would never make it on screen, but it'd be cool to see. Thanks. That's a good question. I don't know. What does it look like? It's an alternate reality that first appears in Secret Avengers Volume 1, number 33. Oh, and the reasons it's called Earth 666, of course, is because in that reality, Earth is a world of the undead. That's where all the Marvel zombies come from. Hey, man. I mean, I think it's goofy, but I have a Marvel Zombies omnibus. Alexander Wilson, how you doing, buddy? A Robservations, it must be a good day. What were your thoughts on HBO's Winning Time? My dad was a basketball player in the 70s and has met the people that were portrayed on the show. He said it's fun, but it's like a cartoon. It was very silly to him. I agree. I loved it. I loved Winning Time. It was wildly amusing. Like, I never took it that seriously. I mean, obviously it was everything was done in a very heightened manner, but it was wildly entertaining to me. Wildly entertaining. And I think I think that what I really liked about it was I didn't realize what the NBA was in dire straits in the 70s. You know, I didn't realize that, and that it was really the Laker dynasty that brought back basketball to being, because, you know, I'm from Seattle, so the Supersonics won the world championship in 78 and 79, you know, downtown Freddie Brown and Jack Sikma and Slick Watts, and, you know, we talked about that before, I think. So I enjoyed it. You know, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was hilarious, and it was, again, wildly entertaining. Michael Strathmore says, I can't trust anyone whose comfort food is berries. Is that a quote? Let's see. Because I don't know that one. Although maybe you're just telling me that because you believe that. I don't know. But I like that. I like that. I can't either. Berries aren't comfort food. Fernando Barrero is here. Hi, R&B. Happy belated. My mom sends you blessings, and we both wish you continued success with your health. We just watched Star Wars Episode 3 to get ready for Kenobi. I've really enjoyed the offer so far. Your thoughts? Miss consistent Robservations. I'm going to try and get back to consistent Robservations. It's been rough with this move and starting with John, but all that's kind of over. You know what I have to say? I think the offer is complete fiction, but I'm loving it. Does that make any sense? I'm loving it. I love Miles Teller's Al Ruddy. For those of you who don't know, there's been 6 episodes out of 10 of The Offer, which is a docudrama about the making of the Godfather movie. Now, I don't know if you read like Peter Bart's column about how true it is. I've read a number of books. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. Read that book about the making of the Godfather. The Offer seems a bit fictitious, but I don't care because I love watching it anyway. It's wildly entertaining. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm glad please give my love to your mom. And episode 3, I got to watch that. I can't wait to see Kenobi. I think I'm going to watch. It's funny. Here in the Robservatory, it's all going to be put together, but I have a 65-inch OLED that I'm putting on the wall there. And I've set up a Dolby Atmos system in here. I mean, it's ridiculous. The Dolby Atmos system that's in this place is nuts. But I haven't fired it up yet because I need these other shelf units, and I got to get the that come tomorrow. And I'm going to bolt the thing to the wall. And everybody's invited. Party in the Robservatory. This will be one. It's small. I mean, it's a 2-car garage, but let me tell you, there's some technology in here, man, and we've got a lot of movies to watch in 4K. Dolby Atmos, woo! It's gonna be good. So come on over. I'm gonna watch episode 3 in honor of you and your mom. The Jughead sends another super chat in. Well, thanks, Jughead. Yeah, thanks. That's very nice of you. Roger Green. Is it Green? I know it's Grind. Is it Grind? I always forget. I don't know why I forget. You've told me that before. But Roger, how are you? I'm sad that shows like The Man in the High Castle will never come out in physical media. Why don't they want my money? I don't know, man. I'd love to get that show in physical media. I'm telling you, physical media is dying. And I don't mean to be that guy, but it is dying. There's really nothing we can do about it. It's just, nobody wants that. All I know is that I got my Round Midnight. Yes, from Criterion. Thank you, Criterion. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's very upsetting. I don't know why they don't want our money. They should just give us everything we want. Darth Plato says, wasn't it part of Space Seed that the genetic manipulation of people also suffered from the enhancement of other traits like ambition? Well, no. They weren't enhancing those traits, but Spock says superior ability breeds superior ambition. When you're the best of the best, and when you have a bunch of Supermen that are the best of the best, that's what you get. When you have superior abilities, you get superior ambition. And by the way, that's a great. It's it's like they're touching on all of these things like augments and all that. It's like, go back and watch Space Seed, man. It's all there. Take it from there. They don't, though. They watch Star Trek 2, and it's like you didn't watch Space Seed. Jay Bling says, the Avatar YouTube channel put up an hour-long video that's just an underwater medley based on James Horner's score on a loop. They really get me. Laugh out loud. Well, I can't wait for that. I'm really looking forward to Avatar 2. I think it's going to be great. Alexander Wilson says, be careful about eugenics. The Tuskegee experiment was classified as eugenics hypothesis. There have been a vast amount of people sterilized in this country on the grounds of stopping generations of imbeciles, which was eugenics. Oh, yeah. No, and the Nazis, of course, with their eugenics programs. I don't necessarily believe in eugenics. I believe in genetic enhancement. I think that look, if we can stop diseases and things like that, if we could be bred, look, it's monstrous and we need limits on it, but and I'm only assuming that people are going to do only good things with this technology. But if I could be made smarter, if my IQ could be smarter, if I could lift things longer, what I really And what I really think we need to, what's most important would be longer lifespan. I honestly believe if human beings had a longer lifespan, they'd start thinking about things differently. Their lives. If we could live an extra 100 years, you wouldn't litter. Because what if all you people are going to litter for 200 years? I mean, come on, man. You'd start thinking about the long term. So, yeah. Yeah. But yes, I mean, in the past, eugenics, especially here, have been monstrous. Chris F. sends a super chat and says, there's a reason why Harlan Ellison has a special credit at the end of The Terminator. Yep, he had to fight for that one too. Of course, you have to. The Jughead, for those of you who don't know, yes, when The Terminator came out, it bared a striking resemblance to a script he wrote for The Outer Limits. Demon with a glass hand or the soldier? I forget, one of them. But, and they had to reluctantly admit, okay, yeah, it's true. The Jughead, 3 out of 4. Did you have 2 others, or have I not been reading them in order? Hi, Rob, again. You being here is the perfect argument against abortion. The world would be a cooler place, or the world would be a colder place without Robert Meyer Burnett. Oh, you old softy. I appreciate that. Look, here's the thing. I don't think anybody likes abortion. Nobody wants to have it done. And people always come back and go, well, too many people use abortion as birth control. I don't know. I mean, I listened to my biological mother talk to me about how difficult the decisions were, and she had 2 kids. Believe it or not, I have a 100% biological sister who's 14 months younger than me. And the thing is, it's tough. If the reverse was true, if we took care of people that are here very, very well, I would say, okay, maybe you have a point, but we don't. And the idea about being pro-life, we're only pro-life till you're born. And then, where are your school programs? Why don't we put money into education? Why don't we make life bearable in this country? We won't even address a homeless problem. All of our homeless that are on the streets, it's not that they don't have homes to live in. That's one of the problems, but a lot of them need help. But there's no profit in helping people, even though Michael Corleone once said that there was. Helping your fellow man is profitable, and we don't want to do that. And we're a very schizophrenic society. On one hand, we'll ban abortion. On the other hand, we won't help people that are here, and that's weird. And I don't get it. Full Metal Smile sends in a super chat and says, "Happy 800th." Well, thank you. Didn't realize this was it. Discovered your channel at the start of the pandemic. Found new kindred spirit in you, sir. Your positivity is contagious and got me through COVID and drawing again. Ooh, I love hearing that. Live long and prosper, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. I love hearing that you started drawing again because of this channel. That is fantastic. Love it. The Jughead comes back and says, 4 out of 4. Regarding the choice aspect, don't mean to get too heavy on this. Hey, stop growling at the dog. Listen, she growls at our little puppy. I don't mean to get too heavy on this subject on a cool Friday night. Remember, brother, no insemination, no conception. Love and respect, again from the UK. Yes, that is true, But again, I believe in the sovereign right of the individual to control their own destiny. But I also don't think that we should allow all abortions willy-nilly. I don't think that we should be having second and third trimester abortions. I don't think that that's, you're getting to a point where it's a tough call. It's a tough call. And I am not, I believe in the right of people to control their own bodies. I think we have to, rightly or wrongly, if we cross over a line, I mean, the rest of the world has caught up with us in terms of mostly allowing abortion to continue. They understand that reproductive rights are vital. And if we're going to do that in our country, I think we're taking a huge step backwards. I really believe that. Because it's an issue that isn't just about abortion. Doomed, sends in a super chat and says, I thought they were saying Elorian. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? How would they reconcile that? Roberto Suarez, our man, Roberto, the man with the plan. Rob, I hope you're doing well. Like you, I too am recovering from COVID. Oh my God. Currently on day 4 of quarantine. I hope we can host a members-only chat soon. Maybe, can we do it on Sunday? That could be fun. Why not? Alexander Wilson says, I could talk about 70s NBA for days. People forget that the ABA took a lot of shine away from the NBA. Also, I was reading that there is friction between Quinn Snyder, between Coach K, which meant that Quinn was never under consideration for the Duke job. Oh, that's interesting. So for those of you who don't know, Quinn is the coach with the Jazz. He's still with the Jazz, right? I grew up with Quinn. I went to kindergarten with him, elementary school, junior high, high school. He was always one of the nicest kids. He was a straight A student and an incredible ball player, and he led our basketball team to the state championships in 1985. So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Mark Nadeau says, "Hi Rob, I was wondering if Jack Lord was asked to play Kirk or Pike in the original series. I remember hearing that rumor years ago. Probably. Yeah. I could see that. I mean, I'm sure they thought of a lot of people, but I couldn't speak to that directly." Roger Green comes back and says, "So sad that Vangelis died." By the way, it's Vangelis. Everyone, I said Vangelis for a long time, but then I was corrected. Somebody told me it was Vangelis, and I'm like, really? And it turns out it is. So I've been saying Vangelis for years now. People are like, it's Vangelis. I'm like, well, it wasn't. I love Vangelis. You know, I spent an obscene amount of money once for a bootleg CD of the Bounty soundtrack. It wasn't even that good of a bootleg, but I wanted it. I'm a huge fan of his albums like Albedo and Heaven and Hell and Direct. I'm a huge fan of his. I loved his film music. You know, I loved his score for the Japanese movie Antarctica. I love that. It's great. Of course, Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire and Alexander, and he was an incredible talent. And luckily, he left us a great body of work. I love the work he did with John Anderson from Yes. Like The Friends of Mr. Cairo was a favorite of mine when I was in high school. So Roger says, so sad that Vangelis died. We had Conquest of Paradise played at my grandfather's funeral as he loved the song. It's Grind as in FBI. Roger Grind. Grind. Okay. I think you told me that before. So it's Roger Grind. I got it. Michael Strathmore. Oh, here you go. Michael Strathmore says, Sing and Una say strawberries are their comfort food. So relatable. Give me a Troy chocolate sundae every day of the week already. Strawberries? Pfft. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. How can? Yeah, they're not. Berries are not comfort food. They're not. Poochie Pooch says, I just stumbled upon an old Punisher run from Marvel's 1991 Punisher POV. Frank hunts down a former 60s radical exposed to toxic waste, giving him healing powers. This limited run gave my teenage brain comic boners for months. Heard of it? I think I have it. I haven't read it in a long time, but it rings a bell. You know, I seem to remember that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge Punisher fan. I have a lot of Punisher omnibuses. I don't have this though, but I had the comics. So yeah, let's see, a bunch of people became members, which I appreciate. Big Raj, Jeffrey Lindenblatt, Channel Surf, Micah T, Roberto Suarez. Everybody's memberships renewed. Thank you for that. Simon Peter says, I think I will get hurt over the weekend so young Nurse Chapel can tend to me. Yeah, I mean, these characterizations. What? Nurse Chapel. Yeah, let me just genetically alter you with genetic material from a race we've never met before. Sure. It's so weird. Michael Francis talks about The Offer. His father was Joe Colombo's number 2 guy in the mob. He said it's like 30% true, but they got the Colombo-Gallo rivalry correct. Also, he reached out to Al Ruddy, who said he wants nothing to do with them. Wow. Tallulah, why are you growling? Why? Okay, guys, do I have to go play with you? Are you guys tired of me talking for so long? Simon Peter says, happy 800th episode, you great tiger of the galaxy, Rob, sitting next to the great bird of the galaxy. Well, Simon, that would be a lot of fun. I would love to do that. Well, everybody, that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify. that brings me to the end of this 800th episode of Robservations. It's not like the extravaganzas of yore, but we're going to do one for the 900th episode and, of course, the 1,000th episode of Robservations. And I'm going to try and do these much more regularly from now on. I apologize that I haven't been. It's just been a little discombobulating around here. And Gilbert wants me to do them. Come here, buddy. Why are you barking? Yeah, I guess the dog's coming in and out isn't so bad. Well, now you're being intrusive. You can't ask me for food. It's not time for you to eat yet. Come on, dude. But anyway, I want to say thanks to everybody. This has been a fun show. It's great to have letters. Again, if you want to send me letters, right down there. Go to the postgeeksingularity.com. Go to the website. Check it out. It's a fun website. There's tons of stuff there to look at. Mike's putting stuff up every day. It's a rabbit hole. Come here. Come here, Gilbert. What do you want? Stop barking. Whenever I go to my own website, I fall down a rabbit hole. And Gilbert, come on, stop. Come here, sit. Sit. Come on, sit, buddy. He just wants me to play with him. He doesn't like me not paying attention to him. So anyway, check that out. Send me letters. I'll read them I'll read them on this show. And everyone who supports the channel generously through super chats and tips, I thank you. Very much appreciated. Keeps the channel going, and we're going to be expanding and doing other things, putting more shows up. And of course, you can get the audio version of this. Gilbert, I know you want me to come. I know you want me to play. I know, but it's time for me to end the show. You can get the audio version of this wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want, we also do other video and audio podcasts. There is the Road Tripping with Rob that Mike Bodden and I do every morning when I go to work. And it's pretty fun. I really enjoy it. So check that out and all of the other things. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to everybody, have a better day. Why you guys got to do that? Why do you got to come in here and be problems? Huh? Gilbert, man, I'm not going to let you guys in here. It was easier when you couldn't get in. Now I have to let you in.